Continuamos con nuestra programación y ahora vamos a darle paso a un espacio que hemos llamado Inteligencia Artificial Generativa, Innovación y modernización en el mercado de capitales. Nos va a hacer un contexto global acerca de este tema Alex Mirarchi. Él es Principal Capital Market Specialist de Amazon Web Services, uno de nuestros patrocinadores. Así que, Alex, te damos la bienvenida y te invitamos, por favor, para que nos acompañes aquí en el escenario. Adelante. Les recordamos, sí, lo recibimos con un aplauso, claro que sí. Y les recordamos nuestro hashtag con el que todos ustedes pueden participar acá de manera presencial y de manera virtual a nuestros asistentes que están hace 2 días acompañándonos. Y es el hashtag numeral nuam asobolsa, hashtag nuam asobolsa. Y en nuestras redes estamos en asobolsa o como nuam, como BBC Colombia, Grupo BBL, Bolsa de Santiago y Bolsa de Lima. Y antes de que comiences, Alex, quiero comentar que hemos encontrado unas gafas, unos lentes, así que la persona dueña de estas gafas las puede reclamar con nosotros, con alguien del staff. Ahora sí, Alex, bienvenido, adelante.
Gracias. Okay, we pueden escuchar? You can hear me all? Good. It's Friday. We're almost at the end of a fantastic conference put on by nuam and Asobolsa. Thank you again for inviting AWS to be here. It is a pleasure. As was mentioned, my name is Alex Mirarchi. I'm on the capital markets market development team at AWS, and I lead our business development for all of financial market infrastructure across all asset classes. So that includes exchanges, clearinghouses, and CSDs, as well as everything to do with trading and connectivity in the cloud. Uh-oh. Tranquilo? All right. And so before I speak, is the deck working? Can people see the slides here? Or I guess I should wait. Ah, perfect. I mean, I'm sure you would love to see my face, too, on the screen as well, but I figured it might be good to have some slides. Perfect. So before I kind of speak about generative AI, right, and kind of share some of the thoughts of what we're seeing from an adoption perspective and our views for what the future might hold, I figured I might kind of hit on 4 key topics, right? The first is Amazon and what we've been doing in the machine learning space for about 2 decades now, how we're working with customers to integrate machine learning, both traditional AI, right, and generative AI more recently, to modernize their business models and pretty much every way possible. The third is kind of one of the trends we're seeing that's been around for a while, but really got, I guess, turbocharged again in light of AI, which is, a heightened focus on data as a differentiator and how customers are thinking about an end-to-end enterprise data strategy. The third, and I'll keep it brief, but I'll talk about AWS's generative AI solutions. We're a cloud provider, so we have to talk about, the tools we give. And then fourth, I'll kind of share some of my thoughts on the future. So again, before we get into the generative AI side of things, I figured I'd kind of start at maybe a 30,000 view and share Amazon's story with machine learning. So we've been integrating machine learning, right, across pretty much every segment of all of our businesses for over 2 decades, right? And there are literally thousands of examples I could provide to you, but I've only kind of shared maybe four on the slide in front. So if you search on Amazon.com, any of the recommended search items that pop up are powered by machine learning, right? So let's say you're looking for running shoes or maybe a boot because you injured your foot because you're too old to play soccer like me. And the recommended item that will pop up, maybe socks or orthotics, is powered by machine learning. The summaries around products, so if a product will receive thousands of reviews, 4 stars, 5 stars, that's generated by generative AI to give you a sentiment analysis, a trend analysis, and other kind of key details. Our supply chain, right? Everything from the specific paths that robots take within our factories and our warehouses, down to the routes that our ships take, the routes that our cars take, our autonomous fleet of drones. All that is powered by machine learning. And if you ever get a chance to visit one of our facilities, it's kind of incredible to see how this stuff all works. Amazon Alexa, right? That's an AI system that's powered by 30 separate machine learning algorithms that responds to tens of billions of prompts, a week. Our technology that powers Amazon Go stores, where you can walk in and walk out without having to pay for anything that you use. That leverages a type of machine learning called deep learning, right? Leveraging autonomous neural networks to get more kind of precise pattern analysis to power that technology. And our technology with paying with your palm, right? You can walk into a Whole Foods store, one of the grocery chains in the United States, and just pay with your palm. So that kind of history is really quite important because we've been using this across Amazon and building with it for 20 years, and that informs the way that we think about building and providing tools to our customers at AWS, right? We're both a user of the technology and a provider of the tools to the technology too. And for a similar amount of time, right, so about 20 years now, 18 to be exact, we've been working with capital markets firms at AWS to help them innovate their business models, right? And this is important, right, because I'm sure as you all know, capital markets are deeply interconnected, right? And so to accurately service the entire industry, we have to work from an end-to-end perspective across every subsegment, right? So that includes every type of capital markets firms, like financial market infrastructure providers, so exchanges such as nuam, clearinghouses, central clearinghouses, high-frequency trading firms. This is kind of where I spend most of my time. Wealth management firms, retail trading platforms, broker-dealers, regulators, right? As well as ISVs at every stage of the trade life cycle, right? And that kind of gives us that end-to-end view of what our customers need, right? And how that evolves over time. And one of the big trends, surprise, surprise, if the slide will change, one of the big trends from a cloud adoption perspective has been AI/ML, right? And not just kind of AI/ML as an academic topic, but integrating AI/ML at pretty much every stage of the trade life cycle across customers' entire business models, right? And I should kind of take a second to acknowledge this isn't just within capital markets. Like, this is a trend we're seeing across AWS and pretty much every industry we service. Today, about 100,000 firms use AWS for their machine learning needs, both traditional AI and generative AI. And while the use cases are literally, you can't even count what they are, I try to group them on the slide in front of you for like the top 8, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, top 8 types of use cases we see in capital markets. And they're kind of arranged from a, call it pre-trade, at-trade, and post-trade perspective. And, it's pretty much anything you can imagine, right? Like Coinbase using, a machine learning to help with KYC, so, know your customer work to root out, financial crime and fraud. Bridgewater, who built the GenAI-powered investment assistant that, does academic and financial analysis for their quants and removes some of the heavy lifting on the analytical side. To NASDAQ, right, who've done a lot in this space, but, have recently announced the launch of the industry's first AI-based order type, DMello. To the post-trade side of things, right, like FINRA, one of the regulators in the United States, who runs their core market surveillance platform in AWS. And this platform ingests about 600 billion events or messages a day, and they run a whole range of machine learning-powered surveillance patterns against that data to drive efficiency for their analysts. So that takes us to generative AI. I'm sure some of the people, some of you have a pretty good understanding of what generative AI is already. But I figured that before I spend the next 15 or so minutes talking about this, and before Andreas and I have our fireside charla, I figured I would kind of quickly define what generative AI is, right? So generative AI is a type of AI, right, which generates new content and ideas from the data that it's been trained on, right? This could be anything from summaries, interactive questions, all the way down to videos, images, or movies, right? And generative AI is powered by large language models. This is a type of deep learning, right? And they're also, LLMs, as they're called, large language models, are also kind of used interchangeably with the foundation model, even though foundation model usually means a big hefty model that's trained on, tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of parameters, right? So, for those of you who've been like looking at the generative AI space, you be aware that Gen AI has been around, like from an LLM perspective, a foundation model perspective, for many years now. One of the hot topics of the moment for enhancing performance of these models and minimizing hallucinations using a technique called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation, was invented by Facebook in 2020, right? So this concept of AI kind of creating new content, not being traditional AI where it kind of uses data and predicts what a specific outcome could be, but rather, analyzing data, seeing a whole range of complex patterns, and then mirroring or creating new patterns. It's been around for a while, but it really became like a hot topic in part of everyone's everyday life in 2023 when ChatGPT kind of emerged on the scene with a vengeance, right? And so the conversations we were having with a lot of customers were kind of like them formulating a view. I know the slide says that 2023 was the year of POCs. That was kind of more in the back half. Call it from March all the way down to like September. Customers were like, hey, what is generative AI? Like, what's an LLM? What's a foundation model? Is this secure? Is it safe? How do I actually use this, right? And then towards the back half of the year, we saw this avalanche, right? An incredible number of POCs start happening at the same time. Standard & Poor's, S&P, at our conference, our flagship conference, reInvent, which happens every year in November. So almost a year ago, really. Shared how they were conducting over 500 POCs on the GenAI side at once, and we're looking to double that in the coming months. So just to give you a sense of the scale of the POCs we started seeing in 2023. And then in 2024, we started seeing a lot of these POCs increasingly be deployed in production, right? And so the conversations we were having with your peers, and probably with some of you too, shifted from being like, hey, what is this thing? Like, what is this GenAI, right? To what's the best way for us to deploy GenAI at scale, right? And so we're starting to have more kind of strategic discussions on like, hey, what's the best LLM for a certain set of tasks? How do we handle multi-step functions, right, efficiently and accurately? How do we interplay traditional AI and generative AI? What models should we use? And how can we move faster and orient our businesses for a more strategic deployment? And I'm sure as some of you guys know, doing a POC is an experiment, right? Deploying it into production is just a higher bar, right? Oftentimes, even if it's for internal use cases, there's a higher threshold to ensure it meets performance. So a lot of work on the back end for doing analysis of how these things are performing to get best practices and learn iteratively was another kind of layer of our conversations. And within financial services, no surprise, that's kind of where our conversations are happening right now. Customers are looking to optimize their Gen AI usage around 3 key verticals, right? The first is accuracy. You don't want crazy answers coming out of your Gen AI application, hallucinations. You don't want to pay too much, crazy costs. And then latency. Speed to insight is really important. And now, it would depend on your use case. So, for example, we're working with quite a few early adopters on the quant trading side for doing, inferencing at the edge. So deploying usually smaller language models to power inferencing and generate new trading strategies on live market data. In that kind of example, latency is going to be quite important, right? And performance will be important and cost less so. So the kind of things we're working with customers on is things like RAG, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, right? Retrieval Augmented Generation. RAG, sounds cool. In this kind of example, you kind of limit the amount of specific information a LLM can draw from in response to an answer so that it has more targeted answers to given question. Really works for industry-specific use cases or corporate-specific use cases. You want, an internal chatbot to refer to your documentation instead of something you will find on the underlying foundation data training sets. Another example we work with customers on is fine-tuning a model. When you fine-tune a model, you give the data a specific data set and include that in its trading data, oftentimes more oriented to industry use cases or a specific use case. So you optimize the responses for things like industry language and lingo, and specific kind of even regulatory requirements. For ways of engaging with an LLM or a Gen AI application, right? Certain techniques like prompting, so multi-shot prompting, the way you position a question to the model. At the end of the day, a lot of this is driven by statistical analysis, right? And so the way that you present inputs, like these are all kind of, they're words, it's natural language, but how that's, encoded and then decoded and kind of, served with the LLM, it matters with the answers you get. So multi-shot is when you give an example of multiple answers you expect the model to give to pre-train the outcome, as well as assigning, a role to the model. So you can say, hey, I just got this email from my boss. He's not happy. He's very angry. How can I reply back in a position that's professional, but kind of takes into consideration the dynamic here. So model assigning and multi-shot are pretty popular techniques. Okay, And so one of the, I guess, the second order outcomes that we've been seeing from customers leaning in with generative AI and traditional AI is firms realizing just how important their data is as a differentiator, right? So I know this is not a new topic, right? You know, data has been the new gold for over a decade now, or new oil for over a decade now. And it's a true statement. But with AI, that's become all the more apparent, right? How big of a differentiator having, you know, your data appropriately accessed or accessible by AI and in the right way or the right structure has meant. Look, machine learning, you know, any AI system, it depends on two things, right? The amount of data that you have and the quality of that data. And the third, maybe, you know, of course, the way that you train it. So data is the lifeblood. And so if you think about it, you know, any Gen AI application you have, if you interact with, I don't know, an Anthropic Claude model on your phone, right, as a chatbot to answer Q&A responses, you often focus on how the model is performing, the type of model it is, right, the UI, you know, the prompt screen. But underneath that Gen AI application, whenever you enter a prompt, right, and then it spits out an answer back to you, it goes through all this stuff underneath the water, right? The model is just a tip of the iceberg. Underneath that Gen AI application, you have multiple layers of data, right? It's a neural network, right? So there are many nodes here doing analysis on whole ranges of types of data, structured, unstructured data, and semi-structured data, right? So there's a data lake layer that gathers it all together. It ingests data sources from multiple different endpoints. You have to think about security there. And then it's kind of appropriately gathered or chunked together into specific databases or data warehouses that then feed outcomes. Many steps here, right? But the critical thing is data, right? And so a lot of firms, as they start kind of getting deeper into what Gen AI could be, they're saying, hey, wait a second, right? This thing really has the potential to open up new business models, right? Drive more efficiencies, improve customer experience with depersonalization, right? And this is a trend that we think is going to continue to be here for the long term. We want to take this moment in time to really do the hard work, right, and organize our entire IT and data strategy so that we can create a framework, right, that we can, you know, quickly move to integrate this technology for operations and kind of build for the future. So a really big trend we've been seeing that's been turbocharged again by generative AI. And so AWS has been working with customers to make this easier, right? Especially on the Gen AI side of things. And we've been working from our history of, you know, making machine learning tools available to customers across the entire stack and take that same principle of democratizing access and providing customers with the broadest set of tools possible to what we do on generative AI. And we're doing that at every layer of the technology stack. At the application layer, we've launched Amazon Q, which is our intelligent assistant for business, and there are a few flavors of it. Amazon Q Business, which, you know, integrates with your own intelligent internal knowledge store base, right, your own proprietary data sets, and answers questions in natural language queries. Amazon Q Developer is our code development tool that helps customers generate code on demand. We're seeing a lot of interest in that for customers who want to upgrade, you know, code from Java 8 to Java 11, or someone who, you know, needs to change COBOL code in a mainframe into something people can use today. This kind of helps accelerate that process and minimizes time spent, as well as integrations with Amazon QuickSight, which is our business intelligence tool, and Amazon Connect, our a contact center of servants to do kind of analytics on customer engagements at scale. At the platform layer, our main way of providing, you know, flagship foundation models is through Amazon Bedrock. There, you know, you can just make a call on AWS's primary foundation models, Titan, as well as foundation models provided by a range of other kind of, you know, model producers like Anthropic, Hugging Face, Mistral, Facebook's Llama 2, and many others. Again, through one single API call. And, you know, for customers who want to build their own foundation models, right, we make that available, through Amazon SageMaker, which is our flagship machine learning training platform. So, for example, Bloomberg, when they built Bloomberg GPT, which was the industry's first, I think the world's first industry-specific foundation model, they built and trained that on Amazon SageMaker. And even down at the infrastructure layer, we're building our own customized chips, like our own actual hardware, that's kind of designed for specific use cases. So Inferentia is for inferencing, right? Trainium is for training a model. And these chips are about 30 to 40%, depending on your comparison, to other chips for the same performance level. And they, again, consume about 40% less power. And that's all in addition to providing, the broadest selection of other GPUs by other, providers in the cloud too. Okay, so now this takes me to a few thoughts on what, the future might hold for capital markets generative AI. Now again, this is just my perspective. If I really knew, I wouldn't be in this booth standing in front of you today on stage. I'd probably be in the Caribbean on a massive yacht having a grand old time and partying instead of working for a living, but here I am. And so we kind of see four main trends, right? The first is kind of end-to-end adoption of GenAI, again, across the trade lifecycle. And we're seeing that kind of increasingly happen as models get better, right? Performance gets better. They're trained on larger data sets. Facebook's Llama 3, I guess we're on now, was trained on 450 billion parameters. We're expecting to see that 1 trillion mark happen soon. We expect to see customers continue to innovate and drive product and business innovation, with generative AI being a core feature or at least an additional feature. We expect to see more increased efficiencies as GenAI automates more and more tasks, and that interplay between traditional AI systems, right, and GenAI kind of gets better, again, on complex multi-step processes. And then increased hyper-personalization, and at the scale of like hundreds of millions of interactions a day with a similar wide number of customers. And we're already seeing that happen at scale, right? I kind of just picked a few examples of what large exchange operators and regulators are doing with generative AI and what they've been speaking about publicly, right? The New York Stock Exchange at reInvent, our flagship conference I mentioned before, shared how they built an intelligent trading rule assistant to answer questions for their internal kind of workforce on complicated global rules on demand. So a really good example of how customers are improving customer experience, both internal stakeholders and external stakeholders, efficiently. FINRA, the regulator in the United States, shared how they're using Amazon's code development and code writing tools to accelerate their software development lifecycle and do things like generate code, check code, double-check data quality and lineage, and analyze model performance. And then NASDAQ. NASDAQ's done a lot of things on the generative AI side. One that I've just kind of included that they announced a few weeks ago was the integration of generative AI into their market surveillance platform, which they use for their own markets, as well as they make available to their customers as a SaaS solution. And with generative AI, they've cut down the amount of time that analysts spend investigating issues or cases of potential market activity by about 33%, forgive me. And so I figured I'd leave you guys from this, presentation part of the session with a few practical steps on how to get started here. The first for me is actually number 2 on the slide. So empower your teams through a variety of training opportunities and learning so people can kind of understand how to use these tools. A second is select the right use case for you all, where to focus your initial effort. A third is do the POC, get started on it, get a sense for how this will work in production. Fourth is take it to production. And fifth is, analyze the performance of those models so you can get best practices and take those learnings both for that deployment and future deployments too. Okay, I think with that, that's all I had prepared for the presentation. I think, Andreas, should we have our Charla? Thanks.
So thank you, Alex, for your interesting presentation.
Gonna run over and jump,
Y nuevamente bienvenido, Andrés Araya. Ellos van a tener a continuación una interesante retroalimentación acerca del contexto que nos acaba de hacer Alex. Así que adelante nuevamente.
Okay, thank you, Alex. By the way, Alex speaks very well Spanish. So next year maybe you could try in Spanish, okay? It's a challenge.
Okay, accepted.
Okay. Accepted?
¿Hacemos ahora en español o no? No.
Very good. Sounds very good. Okay, thank you, Alex, for your presentation. Very informative. This is an extremely complex thing from the perspective of infrastructure, believe me. Doing what AWS are doing is a great effort to facilitate to their clients do this kind of thing. So thank you for what you are doing. As you may know, NASDAQ have a great partnership with Amazon Web Services, and obviously nuam are doing the same thing, and we are building our relationship. And thank you for sponsoring this conference.
Placer.
So you mentioned some examples of how clients are dealing with generative AI, because we are with different modelings. We are working for a few years, but generative AI is the new things that we could use And I think that it's good for the audience maybe hear more in deep detail some examples of how brokerage houses or market infrastructure are using it. And if you can tell about the client's name also, if there is public, even better.
Yeah, sure. AI adoption, generative AI adoption, as I mentioned, have been really big trends, right, within capital markets for over a decade, right? And generative AI, it captures the imagination because of that ability to create something new, right? And kind of recognize deep patterns within its training data set and then mirroring that pattern into new contexts. That's the really cool thing, right? And so when we look at customers' adoption of AI and generative AI, it's really been under two key categories, right? The first is driving operational efficiencies, right? Doing the same level of work better and more efficiently, so you save costs. And the second is to launch new business products and services, right? To innovate, either existing offerings or to launch something net new. And so on the, net new side of things, and I'll kind of lump together AI and generative AI because it kind of is, in my mind, pretty much the same thing. You have customers like Vanguard, right, who, they offer investment glide paths to customers in the United States for their retirement accounts. So your pensions, your 401ks, and these glide paths take in considerations like your age, your retirement, target retirement date, your risk profile, target returns, income, contribution amount, everything you can imagine. And they generate an investment basket that dynamically changes and adjusts over, your life, right? And previously they offered 20 of these paths, right, which were, again, powered by machine learning. They leveraged Amazon SageMaker, right, and refined that model to now offer about 1,300 of these investment glide paths, so hyper-personalization at about 4% of the cost it would have been to do it on-prem, right, at about 1/12 of the time. Another good example is HSBC, right? They built the industry's first AI-based index, right, that self-rebalances and directs a lot of, quite a few funds that are based off of that index at scale. And they use a feature that AWS provides called Amazon SageMaker Clarify that helps address the challenge of explainability and ethical AI usage, so you can see what inputs on the data side led to what specific outputs, and you can measure performance and measure model drift. Third, another example for NASDAQ, they launched a GenAI powered solution on the data side of things called NASDAQ Sustainability Lens, which aggregates data on the ESG side from about 6,000 companies and provides customers with on-demand reports, analysis, summaries across a whole range of those E, S, and G buckets, so that you can kind of benchmark your own performance, understand the latest trends, and compare how a group of your peers are behaving, right? On the operational efficiency side of things, I mean, as you mentioned, this has been something that many people have been using to do something simple like automating, text extraction, right, all the way to kind of forecasting complex liquidity needs for customers. But that's kind of what we've been seeing too, right? DTCC, we've been working with them for quite some time. They built a machine learning algorithm to predict settlement failure risk because, even if you have a settlement failure risk of about, 0.1%, if you're clearing 20 billion transactions a year, right, even 0.1%, that's a lot of things you have to deal with. And each process is pretty manual. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of back and forth. You have to double check. It's a mess. So building a model that can predict that and minimize and take remediative action before things happen is quite important. Euronext did something similar on their CSD, the security side. They built a machine learning algorithm on AWS that predicts customers' liquidity needs so they can more efficiently allocate capital and transfer securities whenever customers need them. And then another good example is Broadridge, right? They do all the proxy voting in the United States, so whenever there's an issue that customers need to vote on at a general meeting. And previously, they had a team of about 160 analysts in India that would manually extract information from a whole range of corporate filings, and it'd take them about 50,000 hours a year to do this. And so they used a few kind of tools: Amazon Textract to extract text from documents, Amazon Comprehend, one of our natural language processing kind of tools to identify relationship between the words, So they removed all that process and could repurpose the team to higher value add kind of functions. And then they fed that out, this new data set into SageMaker to launch a new product to predict potentially contentious votes and then monetize that, right? And now, they and others are exploring leveraging this or integrating this with generative AI, like a chat function layer, so you can dynamically interact with it. Another area we're seeing is kind of incorporating, intelligent assistants across products, portfolios, and suites. S&P is doing this with Capital IQ. We have Amazon Q, and a lot of our customers are looking to integrate this as a function, a co-pilot working function across their entire portfolio. So really broad range of applications that we're seeing. I think I should have mentioned it when I was speaking. If I didn't, forgive me. But we're starting to see, especially on the early adopter side of things, from a trading perspective, is AI-powered algorithmic trading and inferencing at the edge. We just did a large POC. Unfortunately, I can't name this customer. With building trading strategies that are powered by generative AI that encompasses a whole range of data sources, real-time news streaming, satellite imagery, tweets, economic data, even weather images, as well as kind of your core kind of financial data, and using that to kind of create new strategies at the edge, at scale. So really cool area that we're seeing, and we expect to see more development there going forward.
Great. You have to remember, Alex, you are a New Yorker, but you are not in New York. We are in Cartagena, so despacito.
Speak a little slower.
Despacito.
Tranquilo.
Yes, relax. Slowly. To follow your English for the audience and specifically for the translators.
And the house back there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Sorry.
Thank you very much for sharing those particular use cases that could illuminate the audience. So many tasks are doing several clients. And talking about clients, what are some of the challenges or even risks that customer encounter when using generative AI, very specifically, and if you come down to Latin America specifically, what is the challenges and risks that you can see to adopt this kind of technology?
Yeah, so I guess, the challenge we're seeing specifically for generative AI is, how do you get started, right? Which models do we choose? Oftentimes, certain customers will say, do we choose a foundation model provided off the shelf, or do we build and train our own foundation model? Then there are kind of questions around hallucinations or inaccuracies, model bias, or toxicity, kind of saying inappropriate words, sharing personally identifiable information. And then there's concern about model data leakage, right? If your data gets used to train the underlying foundation model, your security posture, if you're using certain RAG, retrieval augmented generation architectures, ensuring that data isn't exposed to the internet. These are kind of the big concerns that I think we encounter, not just within Latin America, but globally. In AWS, we built a range of tools to help our customers, kind of navigate these challenges appropriately. We launched Amazon Guardrails, Amazon Bedrock Guardrails, which establishes limits on the types of responses and speech and information that a model can share, so you can filter out inappropriate words, inappropriate language. You can prevent it from sharing sensitive information to customers. With Amazon SageMaker, we allowed customers to analyze model effectiveness and efficiency. SageMaker Clarify is an important one. Our AI service cards let you see the limitations of AI models, how they're designed to be used, and best ways to deploy them at scale in the cloud. At the same time, from a security perspective, you have one API to make a call with Amazon Bedrock. So it's only one specific point of access. And every time you access a model, it's not the underlying foundation model. It's a copy of that model that gets deployed in your tenancy. So your underlying data does not get leaked into the underlying foundation model. And of course, your data is encrypted at rest and in transit, so an added layer of service. At the same time, we understand that to go from an idea to production is another hurdle, right? It's one thing to learn the technology. It's another thing to take that and deploy it at scale and kind of arrive at something in production. So we have something called the AI Innovation Center, which is where we bring experts from AWS in machine learning and partner them with our customers' machine learning teams and take them through the process of ideation, ideas, right, through to proof of concepts, right, and then all the way through to deploying it into production. That's what we did with NASDAQ when they integrated generative AI into their surveillance platform. We did this with Principal Financial when they were looking to kind of figure out a way to get a better sense of all their customer interactions on their customer help and chatbot side. They get about 10 million calls and customer inquiries a day. Previously, they could only analyze about 10% of that at best. So that left about 11 million or 9 million calls. They had no idea what was going on. We worked with them to build a knowledge base, a big data lake of all these interactions, and then do summarization, trend analysis, for all this information to the point where they now can do this in real time, do predictive recommendations to their call center agents to kind of handle any objections or challenges, and then launch new products and services off the back of that. Another thing that wasn't part of the Generative AI Innovation Center, I know I only have 28 seconds, so I might speak like a New Yorker now, is J.P. Morgan recently shared at reInvent how they built a modern or a common data analytics and AI platform for their asset management division. This platform is massive, right? It ingests hundreds of millions of data points every day from over 200 sources. It powers 600 applications across all of their, across the entire organization, and it led to them saving 50% on their data hosting costs, and 30% faster time to deployment for new applications, and $10 billion in new revenue because of this platform. One of the things that we helped them build was a recommendation engine for their sales force, right, which would provide tailored recommendations to each individual salesperson for specific trades, products, and engagement methodologies for them, right, on demand. And because this was generative, right, and was trained by direct customer interaction and feedback, the model got really good. Right, so it cut down the amount of time that you would spend from kind of a salesperson would spend gathering information and conducting analysis from days or weeks to like minutes, and had similar if not better results too. So these are the ways we're helping customers navigate these risks, right, and move forward. The last one, maybe I know we've gone over, is optimize for time, right, and ensure that you have the right model for the right use case. And that's where you get the topic of small language models for dedicated use cases and faster time to value. Okay, that was it.
Fortunately, we are running out of time, but the last question is, I belong to Welfare Exchange Technological Group, and internally we discussed, when we talked about generative AI, is that financial institutions are so many around the world, right? Thousands. But now the concentration of the third party is too high. You're laughing. I know one is Amazon Web Services. You know who is the others? No?
Oh, no.
I do.
Oh, yeah,
I do. Microsoft and Google, right? You are three big guys, right? Technological. So the problem around that is this technology is so many concentrated. Do you really think that it could be a problem around the herding behavior that maybe the models could run, and we are doing the same thing, or create some risks around that? Short answer, please.
And I thought you were going to give me easy questions because I'm injured and I came all the way down. Nah, man. So, okay, the question was, whether the relative concentration of model providers and, I guess, AI tool providers could represent concentration risk for the industry, right? So there are many layers to that question, and I kind of, respectfully, I don't know if I fully agree with a lot of them. And so the short answer is no. We don't think that that's a material risk for markets, right? And while I can understand, as you outlined, right, where this question could come from, like, hey, there's a relative concentration for people who provide out-of-the-box tools to train traditional machine learning algorithms, especially when you compare to the groups of customers using it. I mentioned 100,000, right, that are already using AWS. And I can also see, at the same time, the providers for LLMs, right, large language models. It's a relatively smaller group of language model providers compared to those using it. Within that group, there are many that are there. But at the same time, that kind of ignores how these models are used in production, right? You know, whenever a machine learning algorithm, you know, be it a traditional AI machine learning algorithm that does structured learning, right, or a generative AI, you know, kind of neural network that does both unstructured and structured, you know, the differentiator here, what determines the output, are two things, right? The data that goes in to train it, right, as well as the unique statistical models that go into, you know, optimizing model performance. On both of those instances, people who will use the tools that, you know, for example, we provide with SageMaker, or who use off-the-shelf LLM models, you know, that's their value add. They open up their own internal, you know, proprietary data sets, and they use their own proprietary styles of optimizing performance. At both levels, that dramatically changes how these machine learning algorithms perform in production. So while the use case is the same, right, okay, we're going to use, like a quant fund, we're going to use machine learning to trade our algo execution engine, and that's going to work, right? What you'll see with AQR compared to Bridgewater to Acadian will be very different in production. So a really good way to think about this is, like, you know, I mentioned NASDAQ. They have the industry's first AI-based order type, DMello, for the equity markets. The way that will behave is very different from the way that TrueMid, the corporate bond platform in AWS, you know, how their AI-powered recommendation engine will work too. Same use case, like a trade matching and recommendation system that aligns buyers and sellers. Different kind of performance, you know, example. The example I gave with, you know, JP Morgan earlier in that common data platform, right? That kind of powers that recommendation engine for their sales force. All of their peers are doing this too, right? Anyone who has a retail trading business, any large broker-dealer that, you know, has an asset management arm, is trying to gather this customer 360 perspective and understand every point of interaction with that customer across all product lines and divisions, and then in real time tailor the answers or the results that they provide or engage with the customer, the decisions the machine learning does. Those decisions are unique not only to the firm, but individuals within the firm, right? So what JP Morgan is doing, and maybe another bank, you know, that I can't name, that's doing something similar, it will be different as well. You've been seeing it with Jefferies, right? They have a machine learning platform that powers recommendations for their investment banking arm, right? And the tools and services and the solutions they offer to their institutional customers, that will be different from what JP Morgan sees too. The last thing, and I know we're out of time, I see the number flashing at me, you know, generative AI, we're in the early days, right? Every day I open TechCrunch and I see a new funding round of some whiz kid MIT dropout who's gotten a $200 million funding round to launch a new large language model, right? Mistral, for example, was a recent merger out of Paris, right? And their models are performing very, very well. Customers like, you know, Bloomberg are building their own large language model. There are other financial service customers who I can't name, unfortunately, who we've worked with to build and train their own foundation models. So it's a constantly evolving space, right, which will change over time. And so that kind of implied comment that there's a small static, you know, list of providers of model, I don't necessarily see that. But I don't know. My thoughts as a cloud provider.
Thank you for the short answer. We really appreciate your time, your knowledge, Alex. Thank you for coming and share with us all of that you know about this theme. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Un placer.
Thank you again. Thank you very much, Alex, for this interesting conversation with Alex Araya, por supuesto también por conducirla.